call them users. And then your marketing goal is a funnel. It starts pretty wide with a big net, and then it draws people into a given area. And your form submissions and your people that buy your products and those kinds of things are going to be called conversions. So look out for that. That's important. And then your website is how it's all going to kind of come together at the end of that funnel. So beyond this is whatever you're doing. So brands say a lot of different things, but it's pretty easy to tell by looking at usually the home page of their website, because that's the whole point of your website. Code and Supply is a community for software professionals building software, community, and friendships together. Yeah. Here was a screenshot of AWS I took a couple days ago. AWS, whether you're looking for compute power, database storage, content delivery, or other functionality, and you have really good eyes and you can read that, then you can use AWS. Or went back today, and now we're doing AI. So that's great. So whether you're looking for generative AI and all those other things that were definitely just a part of that CMS, and then they just put AI in there, then that's going to tell the people who you are, and it's going to tell your fans why they love you as opposed to everybody else. Here's another one. Heroku, build data-driven apps with fully managed data services. But that's not all. You can also look at all of the other things. This is a slider that goes to all the other things that they do, if you stick around and look at them. And then Facebook, you can connect with friends in the world around you on Facebook. And they've got a form right there. Boom. Sign in, log in, or sign up. It's all in one spot. Websites, though, they're for your visitors, primarily for your visitors. And they matter. So maybe you're going to put a whole bunch of pictures of your visitors on there, your premium visitors, your members, your fans, the people that are that. And you get one shot at a first impression with those people. That's it. You get one shot at a first impression of it. Some people here haven't ever met me before. You're getting a pretty good impression of me right now. Be it a good one or a bad one? We'll see. Then after that, you cultivate that relationship. You build trust. And you build trust in that identity of your brand. And you turn those visitors into the customers. So visitors, especially your first-time visitors, aren't going to stick around. This is a very old chart, and it's really small, so I'm going to tell you what it is. The blue line is what's called bounce rate. You've probably heard of this before if you're in marketing side of things. Bounce rate is when somebody lands on your website, if they just skedaddle right away. The red line there is the time. The red line there is the number of total page views on your site. You can see that also kind of goes the opposite direction. You know, if people leave right away, they're not going to stick around. And if people stick around for, up to like 5 page views, then it's because your website, they didn't leave right away. They didn't bounce. And this is all based on time. So you can see that by about 2 seconds there, bounce rate, really bad. Page views starting to go down. People are starting to leave after 2 seconds of website page load. Visitors shouldn't wait around. This is a more recent study that was done by Ericsson. And it says that a slow loading page is the same response for you as if you're watching a horror movie. That's a fun one. So your heart rate rises by 44%. If you're a millennial and you're used to fast things, you're okay. It's like this 0.75 second scream lag here for me. Like a horror movie. It's also stronger in countries that have high tech, like America. It's also stronger in high tech applications. So if your website's going to have something crazy like AR or something like that, better be fast, because if it has delays, people are going to really interpret those delays as problems. So modern looking sites, modern applications for technology, going to feel bad. And then this is Seth Godin. He's a marketing SEO professional with lots of good ideas. He says it's not your visitors' fault. They shouldn't wait. They really can't wait, because your visitors are themselves. You're making products for your customers. You shouldn't be trying to find customers for your product. And so we have to really change that mindset, make sure that it's proper there. And websites are, well, they're my job. They're probably your job too, in one capacity or another. Either you're making them, or you're part of a business and the business has a brand, and part of that identity is pushing people toward their website to make conversions. And so website's kind of your job. If you're a startup founder like me, your job's pretty big. I took this from an MVP, how to hire an exec, figuring out pricing, how to run all hands, how to give feedback, how to do great work, how to be productive, building a pitch deck like this one, how to crush launch day. When does PR make sense? How to be a good man. There are 77 different questions that this person compiled by just asking like probably 77 different startup founders what is the most important thing on their minds. So should your website be the most important thing on your mind as a startup founder, even as a branding company? Should the website really be something that we're worried about? So I got this interesting email the other day. Thanks, Priya, for the email, in case you're listening. Hi, hope you're doing well. I checked your website and found it needs to be revamped as per current market standard. No, it doesn't. It's okay. I do this as a living, so it's okay. I think my website's fine. But if you're a startup founder and you're thinking about some other business idea, and maybe you make widgets that go on a time machine and it's the future, so you're probably not thinking about your website. And if somebody starts making you think about your website, you're probably having some heart palpitations because you've got so much else going on. So then how's your website doing? What are you going to do? Who are you going to ask? I'd ask my wife, but she'd say it's great. You ask your visitors. Maybe you have a pop-up that comes up as soon as somebody lands on your site, and you say, hey, how's it going? Is this any good? Is it meeting your needs? And they're like, get out of my face. I'm a visitor. I'm supposed to be here learning things about you, not learning things about me. Or you could watch your visitors. There are lots of ways to do that. You could look at some software that's looking at SEO, like Ahrefs or SEMrush. I guess all these are SEO pretty much, or like focused on that idea. You could track people around, follow where their mouse is going, or even just overall Hotjar. You could just like record what they're doing and see how they're perceiving your site. It's there. It's easy. Google Tag Manager, boom. But that's really, it's too late, because you've got one shot. You've got one shot at somebody visiting your site for the first time, one shot at the skeptic. And you want them to convert into your fans. You want them to convert into people that are clients and customers for your brand. And that might be the only time they visit this month, this year. You don't want to waste that. So Google Lighthouse matters. Google Lighthouse is a tool. I mean, you can read SEMrush is pretty convenient. They give you a nice little blurb there. But it's a universally accepted way to look at how well you're doing. It's in Chrome. Let's see if I got the thing there. Oh yes, Chrome. Come on, Chrome. It's right there in the Chrome browser. in DevTools. So you can pop that up on any website, and you can take a look and see what that website's doing on desktop, on mobile, whatever you need to do. And we'll play around with that later. But that's what it is. And so we have these 4 rings for the web kings doomed to recreate. Anyway, there's 4 ways that you can use Google Lighthouse to see how you're doing. And performance, accessibility, best practices, SEO. I'm going to save performance because people dwell on that one. It might not be the most important anyway. I'd say probably it's not the most important, but yeah. And then while we're here, let's just take a look at how some people are doing. This is just agencies in the city. We blurred them out. We're not trying to call anybody out here. But how are you doing? Like, out of 400, what's your score? So we've got this thing just popped up. This is thanks to Zach Leatherman for this. He's a developer out in Nebraska, I think. If it's not Nebraska, I'm sorry. But he made the Speedlify tool because he also developed something called 11D that makes super fast things. He wanted to brag about it. And then he found that sometimes other frameworks were getting on there. So every once in a while you'll see like a little WordPress logo on here. He built that part so that he can weed out people that aren't using 11D. But he left this to be open source so we can check it out. And you can see right now somehow we got some good scores there, which is nice. I'm happy with that. That worked. Good. Cool. So yeah, let's start with accessibility because I think accessibility is probably the most important Google Lighthouse score. And I think accessibility has also some scary consequences. The monetary consequences for having problems with your accessibility can be between $55,000 and $75,000 for your first offense. So if you're a company that has a website that's out there, it's supposed to be public domain for everybody to reach, ain't gonna work if it's not able to reach everybody. And yeah, there's the main most important thing is the visitors that you have that are coming to your site. So if those visitors have accessibility issues, if they don't have a mouse, if they can't see, if they are using alternate tools or alternate browsers, they need to be included. And so the main thing we think about with accessibility is spoons, because somebody with a disability, you like to think of them as maybe having a certain amount of energy, and everything that they do, maybe some things take them longer or more energy than everybody else. So it'd be like taking spoons of your energy and using more on every individual thing. And so the idea of spoons is kind of a universal one when you're thinking about accessibility in your website, that some people really are using literally more energy to access your site if they can access it at all. And so making it good is very important. For us, the main thing that we looked at for accessibility is just idiomatic development. So when we're building any of our websites, we always start with the way that it is supposed to be done, the way that the elements are supposed to be used, using appropriate HTML elements like nav, section, footer, parts of the page, using those appropriately. Also like image alt tags and things like that. Images have come a long way now that you can use content fit and things like that. So there are ways that you can still make something look beautiful and still have it be accessible. But the main thing that we came across with accessibility is that it's so hard that Google's accessibility structure isn't really even good enough. I wouldn't judge your site only by Google's accessibility. If Lighthouse is saying you've got 100 in accessibility, you may still want to look further. And so I recommend using this tool that's called Axe, and then looking at the WCAG and ADA standards for accessibility. That's going to be where everything is. And in our slides, we will also have links to all of these things. So if you download them later, you'll be able to see that thing. And there's also a discussion on accessibility that I could do in the wrong place. No. No. Not that. Not that at all. Great. Here we go. It's like the shepherd's crook, just slowly pulling us off here. Reload. And we're back. So we're not going to, there are definitely links for WCAG accessibility and things like that if you want them. Q&A session after this talk, download the slides, everything like that, they're available. So yeah, we definitely used that. In the tools that we used, also the Speedlify, it has a section when you expand it out. You can also see that kind of thing. And Speedlify is open source, so you can go and look at Zach Leatherman's code and put it on your own website. It's a pretty cool tool. Best practices, that's another Google Lighthouse metric. It's a pretty easy one. It's pretty easy. I say that, not a lot of hundreds, but basically use HTTPS, use safe and modern JavaScript libraries. You're trying to keep yourself safe from attacks. You're trying to keep your visitors safe. And if something goes wrong and your site gets bad press, that's going to stop people from coming. So it's important. And SEO. Now, again, marketing and branding. We should have this one in the bag, right? And WordPress has a pretty easy job of this. And so we just used the tools that were there. Major code principle, separate your concerns. If somebody's already done it really well, and there are millions of people using it, just use that. And so we used Yoast. Yoast comes up with a lot of things that are really helpful, including a giant FAQ block and other things that you can use out of the box that get transformed into the rich results content that you can see on Google. That's so easy, and it's free, and it's part of WordPress, it's part of Shopify. There are a lot of good ways to use it. Okay, so then the last one would be performance. This is the one that trips people up a lot, and this is the one that also maybe, I'm not going to say less important, because we're still thinking about those horror shows. We're still thinking about the ways that visitors end up leaving and bouncing after the first visit. It's still very important to hit that. And so a lot of people are saying, if you try to figure out how to get perfect hundreds on Google, it's all about getting your speed to match Google's priorities for that. And so didn't put a graph in here, but a lot of what it ends up being is it's kind of a little bit of a logarithmic curve that to get like an 80 or an 85 on Google Lighthouse for speed, it's pretty easy. And then 86 is a little bit harder. 87, it gets to be really, really a lot of details. But I think overall, it's not the way that you think. It's not important for the reasons that you think it is. This is something that you might see when you're doing Google Lighthouse. They show these little clips of like important reasons to use the tool. And this is from Walmart. And Walmart did a study very many years ago on how many conversions they got based on how fast their site was. And they found that the conversions increased dramatically when the pages loaded fast in under 2 seconds. So this goes along with that pingdom graph that we saw earlier. That's where you're seeing the good results. Below 5 seconds, below 2 seconds, that's where you're seeing great conversions, and that's what you really want to look at. It's not for SEO. I see people saying that from time to time on the internet. SEO is kind of more like, as long as your site isn't not loading, then as long as people are visiting your site, SEO looks at so many other things to see where in the search results you are. But speed is just kind of corollary. If you have a good website in a lot of other ways, it's probably fast enough too. But definitely getting conversions. You're having people visiting multiple pages on your website. Every time they visit that page, a little more stress. Every time it's slow. And then eventually that's overwhelming their desire to really care. And yeah, visitors won't wait. So here's what we did. And again, I think the most important thing that we didn't even realize this. We had a pretty cheap hosting plan. We use managed hosting because we separate those concerns. In this case, we pay for managed hosting, but it's worth it for us because the people that do that are better at that than I am. They're better at that than the other folks that I work with. They're handling thousands and thousands of WordPress websites at the same time, and they're using really good code principles to make sure that's working for them. And so, yeah, I'm happy handing this to them and letting them take on that responsibility and the SLA and all that. But the one thing I didn't realize was, even though they promised no noisy neighbors and everything like that, it still wasn't enough to just be on a basic plan there. And so when we started ramping up our hosting for other companies, we got a dedicated environment that did all of that for us. I just randomly checked the site one day and boom, there we were at like 97. What did we do right here? I don't know the difference. I know that the dedicated environment, that talking to your account manager with managed hosting, just leave that responsibility to them and you'll get pretty far. Other things that gave us that last little kick, we minified files like CSS and JavaScript and things like that. We did some of that through plugins, did some of that by hand. We also deferred things that were unnecessary at load time. A lot of the JavaScript we were able to defer, and I'll take a look at those kinds of things. And then we just followed what Google was saying in the Lighthouse scores. So if the Lighthouse score wasn't doing so hot, say, what was it? So we'll start off with a real easy one. Did you know that lazy loading is now just an HTML tag? You don't have to use a special fancy plugin for that or anything. You can just put loading equals lazy, and it's supported by almost every browser out there. It's pretty important. Here's where we deferred JavaScript. So you've got something that's not necessary on page load. And because we're using WordPress, and because WordPress has some pretty heavy idiomatic features when you're using it at this level, if you're queuing the scripts, you can also defer them very easily, just one line there. And we did one more thing. We played around with this, and we found it was making a lot slower speeds for a little while. We just, that last like 99 to 100, the last little thing that we did that put us over the edge was preload just the font that we needed on the homepage heroes, or on the heroes of those given pages, because this helps your what's that part of the speed index called? The content shift. This helps your content shift. If your font is preloaded, it's already there by the time the rest of your page loads, and it doesn't have, like for us, these giant script sort of special fonts that triggered in Google, and Google was like seeing changes. So to get to 100, you might have needed to do something like that. But let's not forget why we're here. The main reason that we're having this conversation at all is because your website matters. And it matters because you're building an identity for your brand. Code and supply. and you're funneling visitors to make conversions. And the rest is your business. So, okay, that's fine. Speed is important. Google Lighthouse is important. I told you that you should have this, and it could be true. But there are a lot of reasons not to be perfect, and I would be remiss without saying that maybe sometimes it's more important. If you're not owning a marketing and branding company, maybe you don't need perfect 100s. If you don't have an e-commerce business, now we talked about Walmart, we're talking about going from your homepage to maybe a bunch of different products, clicking on a lot of different places, and getting that stress of like using the website is really hard. Amazon is really killing me these days. It's so slow to go between products. So if you have an e-commerce business, this is very important. If you don't, maybe less so. Maybe you just have a landing page. As soon as that loads, done. We've got somebody on a form, and they filled out the form, and it's good. If you're not in a technical field, maybe you're selling farm equipment. Somebody is getting satellite internet. They're just literally, yeah, right there. Send me a form. Tell me how many tractors you want me to deliver tomorrow. That's fine. And so if your customers don't expect you to, now, I don't know when you're, I don't know what kind of customers you have. My customers expect me to. But then maybe the last one, the most important one, is if other things are broken. We talked about those business needs as a founder. There are a lot of different reasons that someone can have, can stop and think about the important things and come back to it. This is a priority. It is something that you should not have to worry about, but just in case there's something else out there, like your server's on fire, you should probably go fix that first. So, yeah. And so intentionally, I took the time in this talk to give us time to talk a little bit more about what's going on in Pittsburgh and what's going on with your Google Lighthouse scores. If there are questions that you have, if there are things that you want to contribute. Now, we have the live stream set up, but I'm going to start with questions from the audience. I don't know if, does Google do things, Colin, where it's, or sorry, does YouTube do things where you can?
Let me check the chat.
We can see. So if you're on YouTube, you can try the chat. But yeah, does anybody have any questions or comments about Google Lighthouse? Go for it.
Did you do any caching?
Did we do any caching? That is a good question. Yes. The answer is yes. Caching is super important for any website. If your website is not caching, that means that every time somebody visits your website, your server thinks about it, figures out what it's supposed to do, and then gives the response back. That is a part of most any server's responsibilities, is to do some sort of caching. Then you have caching on top of that. Now I would say that because we use a managed hosting provider and a pretty reliable one, because we use WordPress, which is a pretty well-serviced framework that has a lot of good best practices in place and gets opinionated at a certain point, the object caching, the page caching, everything is in place for us. And we did put a cache on top of that for the minified CSS, JavaScript, things like that. But we didn't have to worry too much about caching because we're doing it that way. There are ways for e-commerce. Caching gets really important with e-commerce because you don't want to cache how many items are in someone's cart or some other parts of the site. You do have to be selective about that. But yeah, that would be far down the funnel when you've already got a customer. And so most of your pages will still be pretty heavily cached.
What are you using, WP Engine?
Yeah. Yeah. We're using WP Engine.
Are you on the lowest dedicated tier or are you higher up?
We're on a dedicated tier. Yeah. Yeah, we have our own instance of something. Okay. So that makes us 100% sure that no one else is causing trouble. And that gets really important when one of your sites is causing trouble. It's very easy to identify what's going on. But yeah, for sure. Any other questions?
Yes. You said you didn't use a page builder, right? I think maybe another topic we had, but like, did you basically custom, or are you in the block editor at all, or how did you actually construct Foundry?
Okay, cool. Yeah, so here's a question about how we built our site. It is bespoke. It is a custom theme. And in WordPress, that means that a lot of the base functions are the same. But then once you get into the editor, maybe there are new blocks that you can use. In our case, that's the way that we build our websites these days. We use the block editor, but we don't use the full site editor. But that's a story for like another day for sure. But the idea is that, yeah, one of the downsides of the block editor, if you're building your own themes, building your own code, ACF blocks especially, the page doesn't know that when it's being rendered, the page doesn't know which blocks are going to be there. And so if you're enqueuing scripts that go with individual blocks, hey, I want this, Lottie file to play, I need Lottie.js. And if you're doing that with ACF blocks, Lottie.js is going to be on every page, unless you come up with a custom solution to fix that problem. Maybe a specific example, but yes, for sure. Did that answer all the question?
Yeah, just basically block editor, right, to a certain extent, and then you're not using full site editing, you kind of just custom dev your theme.
Yeah, so it is bespoke. And on the homepage, there are a lot more of those, but when you get into blogging, they're all, very standard WordPress blocks that we're using. What a question.
What are some of the Lighthouse suggestions for the performance scoring thing? Like the Google suggestions themselves?
Google suggestions themselves, yeah. So what we're, let me see if I can hop back there somewhere around. You were saying like when follow Google's advice, yeah. Let's take a look at that. Can we use the code input supply site? Can we do a Google Lighthouse? I feel like we can just keep on spreading the brand awareness.
Yeah, you can do it. The scores are going to be crap.
We'll see the scores.
It's not going to be that bad.
Because it's on Heroku.
Come on. Bear with me.
As long as the instance is up, and it probably is, then it's not going to be awful. If the instance is off, then you're going to wait about 3 seconds to 4 seconds for startup.
Oh, man. Not going to be converting.
Look at that. Tech Community Leader of the Year. Beautiful. I will get here eventually. Come on, Lighthouse. We're going to be nice, and we're not going to do mobile.
So were those 100 scores for mobile? Or
They are. They are indeed. It is not easy, but it's doable. Even with WordPress, we really didn't even think it was possible, to be honest, folks. That's why we did this. Performance 97.
It's not too bad, actually.
Not too bad, Colin says. Accessibility a little bit low. So we could see what's going on here. Click on one of these guys, and they give you some really great additional advice on what to do. So the background and foreground colors do not have sufficient contrast ratio. Links don't have a discernible name. Maybe there's a link that's an image or something like that, and there's no text to say what it is. Lists don't contain only li elements. That's an interesting one. So lots of little things that they tell you to do. And then if you went through and you were doing a custom development, you could very easily pinpoint these things and change them. Speed gets a little bit harder because sometimes they say things like, there's too much HTML and I can't load it fast enough. And you're like, how do I make less HTML? The site is built so that there's lots of different, conversion hopeful block components and things on the page. What's this one? So this is the speed index is the only thing that's slowing us down. So they have a wonderful cumulative layout shift and pretty much instant paints and no blocking time. I'd say it's pretty good, Colin. No problem there. Here we go. It's always fun. Eliminate render blocking resources or reduce the initial server response time. So that's where Colin's talking about the initial server isn't, absolutely instant. Unused CSS sometimes happens when you have a global style sheet or when you're using those ACF blocks that are loading everything every time. Yeah, but it's right there. And that's where I found that stuff. Other questions?
Did you optimize or did you do any image optimization offline or through like a plugin or something? In addition to lazy loading, obviously. And then did you or did you not serve them through a CDN?
So interesting. Yeah, two parts to that question. Did we do image optimization and where? And then the second one was there a CDN involved? We have a server that's distributed over an edge network, which is a fancy way of saying that there are sort of relays that are very close to where you are, and that's kind of what a CDN is. And these days you can have that cached data. Everything is there. We are not using a separate CDN because that's good enough. And image optimization does come into play because you have to make sure that the download size of all the content that you're putting in that initial parts of your page, including videos, things like that, you want to make them load fast enough that it doesn't cause that layout shift or other things. And we usually have certain standards for those. We try to make sure that they're at least bigger than the largest size that they could be displayed. And then we optimize them before we load them in. There are tools, especially WordPress is known for it's called Smoosh. Smush. Smush Pro. It's very professional sounding.
It sounds like Snooki.
Sounds like Snooki. You got to get that on the live stream. So yeah, there are tools out there. www something maybe like even more W's is another one of those WordPress plugins that does it. But we didn't need to do that. A lot of the time that comes down to if you're dealing with designers that work with images a lot because they know how to optimize and they will just make it the way it needs to be. They'll be using a lot of SVGs and a lot of Lottie files are extremely small JSON packets that turn into SVGs and then animate, but that's a lot lighter than a GIF. So there are ways that those things work accessibly and easily for you. Yeah. Both parts of that question.
Yeah. Did you use WebP or did you just use JPEGs? Or?
We did use WebP. WebP is now supported. Let's see. So we're on. Can I use?
And did you do that through the CDN or through a plugin?
WebP?
Yeah, the next gen one.
I just exported as WebP for the images that we were modifying.
What's your favorite converter? Because everything on Figma is like PNGs, and I'm tired of going to converters.
Yeah, I have used Image Magic and just done it from a CLI, but that's because I'm that kind of guy. But
Yeah.
I guess that depends. You could. There are. If you just
It does
search
come
the
in a lot of
internet and it's
stuff,
really
right? So,
annoying.
like,
Yeah, how many ads can we not click on to get our WebP? And also how reliable are those converters and are they optimizing appropriately? Yeah. But at least these days you can use WebP. Back in my day, but yeah, for sure. Any other questions?
You have experience with service workers for using local cache or like building PWA apps for offline usage?
Cool. I've sorry, it's cool. I think it's awesome. Yeah. When you start to call yourself an engineer, you start thinking outside of the terms of just like web developer. So yeah, what about offline? What about doing things that really scale and work better? There have been situations where people have been encouraged to use tools. Sometimes they're appropriate, sometimes they're not. And I think there are times and places for PWAs. That's what's the P stand for? Personal? Progressive. There we go. I'm an expert. For progressive web apps, there's times and places for them, and that I think that would be great. I haven't seen how to use that with just native vanilla WordPress, and so since a lot of what we're doing is there, I don't mind having them open it in their browser, and I can do a lot with WordPress up to that certain point. So I haven't done it personally, but it's there are times when you need that, especially when you're doing actual mobile app development and working with native integrated apps. But yeah, no, I haven't.
Are you using any speed plugins,
So
optimization plugins?
right, so the optimization, yes, we're using an optimization plugin that is not WP Rocket, that does minification, and that's what it does is minification. WP Rocket would be great, but I'm not going to pay them money for it. They used to not make you pay money for it, and that was cool. Now they do. Sometimes companies do that. Yeah, so we're using a different one, Auto-Optimize or something like that, which is good. It's good. I'm very surprisingly happy with it. Usually if I pick up a new plugin, it scares me for a while, and that one was very trustworthy right off the bat.
But you're only using it for the medication.
Somebody's mouse is mousing away. Any other questions? Cool.
How big is the actual website? Like just in general, like dot boundaries.
How many pages, like that kind of thing?
I guess.
Or how big is in like, yeah, so the question is how big is the website? I think like right now, we started off small, so the publicly sort of accessible, visible pages are light on our website. We try to keep content in the blog, and then we have a couple pages that say who we are. That does not mean that big sites would be any slower, because you're looking at a page-by-page basis. And so if you had a site with 100 pages, more than 100 pages, if you're starting to generate pages with an API or things like that, these are things that WordPress can do. They're not going to slow down those individual pages. The one thing that you might hit is if you're starting to create so many pages that people don't visit them that much, maybe they might be the cache busting visit. And so if you don't get more than one visit per blue moon, then the person that's visiting that is actually the servers rendering their stuff. So you might have to think about how your server is caching. You might have to talk about using those caches appropriately, and maybe making more customized changes to how you cache things. Yeah.
So are these scores over the entire website if you have like multi-page, or is it page?
Just one page, yeah, I was gonna ask that too.
Good question. I did put some other pages there, just a couple, just because Speedlify, so a little backstory about this, Speedlify is able to build daily, but if you're going to build it daily, it's through a Netlify service, like a Netlify build process, and it uses a certain number of build minutes, and they're all free up until a certain limit. And if I only had 5 sites to build and check, I could do that. But so originally I was doing this every day, seeing every day's results. And then I was like, oh, people can, you can see 100, so many times. So this actually, I ran it again today, and thank goodness it turned out pretty nice. But yeah, every page isn't absolutely perfect. We managed to get one more with straight hundreds there. We also did another Studios simple website there. It's around 93 today. It's not perfect, but still within that speed threshold where I feel comfortable saying that it's a good site.
Are you doing anything like rendering it as flat file or anything like that?
For
You know, you could render WordPress sites as flat file, sort of keep the database totally separate until you republish.
cool. So the question was rendering, and I don't know if there's a microphone there, but I don't know if people pick that up. Rendering WordPress pages as flat files. There are also ways to use. There are certain plugins where you can even make static, sort of a static site from WordPress. And I've been a part of projects that do that. This one's not. This one is cached and it's on an edge network, and it seems like it worked out. And now WP Engine are very great at selling you more, and they have an actual like speed your site up thing. I know I don't. In this case, we didn't need that. We just needed to have a dedicated network, sort of a dedicated server that we could use, and then boom, good enough. So that said, now you don't need that stuff. If you do it right, you don't need that stuff. You can still get, and again, 100 straight 100, especially for speed. Straight 100 is not necessary as long as it's fast enough that your users aren't feeling pain. So, I mean, sometimes if you get to that site where it loads kind of like crazy fast, you get to the point where you're like hitting refresh and literally nothing's happening. And like there, you can see the little, it's changing, it's refreshing, and it's a hard cached refresh, it's a uncached refresh, but the page doesn't change at all. You don't need that. it's not necessary. Like maybe you could have like a second to load the page and it would be okay. Come on, Turbo. Hi-ho Silver. There we go. Yeah, sorry. Other questions? It's a pretty good question. You folks have excellent questions.
Those are real sites. Like those are actual like.
These are actual marketing. Okay, here we go. We're going to talk about this now.
Do we want to stop the stream?
No, I think it's good. I think we need to say. So here's something that I mean, Colin brought this up, and I thought, well, Colin was originally pointing me in the direction of maybe somebody who needed development help in Pittsburgh. So the Pittsburgh website is being revamped. That's like the city of Pittsburgh website. Originally was something very, very blue, I guess, and now it's not. And pretty soon it's going to be different. And so I got this link. I was like, oh, cool, that's nice. They want your feedback. What is it supposed to look like? What are you thinking? They're doing that thing where they're asking you. You're the visitor, you're the user, you're the fan. Tell us what you want to see out of this website, which is really nice. And then they said, and we've got it all set. We're gonna get developed. We already have the company there in mind. They're in Colorado. I was like, wait a minute. So, yeah, San Francisco, New York City, Chicago, and Colorado. They're the main hubs of tech. And Pittsburgh, come on. We are a tech capital. And so I'm interested to hear about that. I'm interested to hear how a tech capital, like we have an ability to be good. We have a necessity to stand up to that legacy. I'm here giving this talk to help that, but I'm also open to helping. Sometimes when you get to marketing, those other needs, those other priorities are there, and it would be really easy for somebody who doesn't need to do development per se. If they're meeting all those other needs, maybe that's very important. Maybe that's their ROI. Maybe they're already giving so much value. Design is important. There's another side to this coin, and I'm so privileged because I get to work with a lot of designers that make a very friendly UI, make something that's a user experience that people can enjoy, and it's interesting and new every time. I just love what they do. They're good at that. But when it comes to pulling it all together, I don't think we should be losing and missing out on that accessibility. I don't think we should be missing out on best practices, and speed can be important. And so some of the ones that are a little bit lower on this list isn't in order of size of agency or anything like that. That's just Google Lighthouse scores. So some really large agencies have a need to demonstrate their prowess. They're really good at what they do. They make beautiful, beautiful things. They need to still be accessible. They need to still be good. And you can always send me a contact request. I'll help you out. Like, for real. It's not just for those of us in this room. We need to keep making Pittsburgh a tech hub, or it's not going to be one. And we need to be at that point where you look at Pittsburgh to redesign the Pittsburgh website. So I don't think that was. Colin's like,
No, that's
yeah.
that's how I feel about it.
I mean, my main question on that was I was actually interested how this works because like if it just pulls agencies, I'm probably on that list. I'm probably pretty low. But my question was like, if there was another agency in Pittsburgh though, like however it pulls that data, and they had all hundreds, would they show up right underneath you?
Sure. Yeah.
This is really cool. I don't understand how this works. It's sick.
It is not programmatic. It is not scraping to find Google's top results for Pittsburgh Development Agency or something like that, Pittsburgh Design Agency.
Yeah.
You'll find that each of those results finds different things. And we happen to use that word collective, which means it's really hard to score on any of those lists. It's great. Love it. But I'm still going to stick with collective because that's who we are. But yeah, the idea is maybe these are agencies that we know in the design community, or agencies. We had to hand make a list. And when we started hand making a list and it got to like 20, and then it got to 25, and then it got bigger, and we were like, oh my gosh, didn't realize how many people are in Pittsburgh. But yeah, there are people that I come across just the other day. Like this company on LinkedIn has like 3,000 followers. I just heard of them last week, and they're a huge design agency in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's a big city in tech, at least. So there are a lot of these companies out there. But these were not, and we didn't weed anybody out. This was another part of this where, just like the speed results, just like suddenly finding that we had perfect scores, we also just started looking around and we're like, how did everybody else do? Okay. So yeah, like we can it takes something from the ground up, but I think it's worth pursuing, so we can do that.
Framework for that is open source, you're saying? So the guy from Nebraska?
This tool is open source. It's called Speedlify. Yeah. And you can put this on your website. You can put this, as according to Zach, he has one of those MIT licenses. You can use this to your own,
your website built on WordPress that shows the template that
My website's built on WordPress, but it doesn't have the I forget what that thing is. There's a part in the header of your site you have to put a thing, and that's what shows up there. It might be that certain themes have it, and that's why you see that sometimes. I don't think any of these didn't have WordPress. They just had things that didn't have an icon. And so ours is built with WordPress,
Because it's custom.
but we didn't. Yeah, we chose not to put that in the back end. But wow, that's going to be really hard to get to. But it's WordPress.
Do you have any additional like security layers beyond the CDN?
Security
Beyond
layers like
Cloudflare?
global edge security and things like that.
Yeah, just like limit login attempts.
Those are really good tools for sure. Can't speak to that. Put on my sunglasses. No, there's a lot of good stuff out there to keep your stuff very secure. WordPress is an open source framework. WordPress has a lot of open source plugins, and those vulnerabilities get exposed daily. If you're using a lot of plugins, be careful. But overall, if you keep good tabs on it, if you're doing it as a hosting service and caretaking those other sites, we always say when we develop a website, like, hey, it's time to think about your website in 2 years. If you're still using these plugins 2 years from now, maybe there's going to be a vulnerability that affects your site. And if that goes away, you've lost all those conversions. Maybe you've lost all of your form data. Maybe you've lost your entire site. You need to think about security and who you're hosting with. It's a big part of your Google Lighthouse scores. It's a big part of your security concerns. Who's doing this, and if there's somebody there already who's helping out. Because some site, yeah, you're a small business. You're like, I just paid you a lot of money to make a website for me. That's all I'm going to budget for the website. We're going to step back. We're going to pay for, $10 a month. It's good enough for me. So if it goes down, sometimes you get what you pay for, and it's not the fault of the developer. It's just when you use a plugin, there are certain risks and liabilities that need to be accounted for. Other questions?
How many plugins would you say are on that site?
4. Yeah, and one of them is Yoast. Definitely. Because I'm just not doing that myself. There's so much that they do to make it like, what kind of organization do you have? How are you going to show up? Do you make recipes? Maybe there's a Yoast recipe thing, and then it shows up in the other, you have a recipe on your page. It formats it like a recipe. It outputs like a recipe, and then on your Google search results, it's showing up in that rich text where it's giving the ingredients that your recipe needs. It's really wonderful. I never want to make that myself. In fact, the open source contribution I was making with the Jekyll static site builder was related to the Jekyll SEO gem, which is Ruby's version of a plugin. So you could have this SEO part of your site, Jekyll SEO, and it would build out all the SEO for all the pages when it built the site. And it was not following Google's modern standards for doing that. And it was a really big pain to match those standards using the open source, the principles of that particular thing, and working with people that may chime in open source is important for sure, but that particular gem might impact 10 people, 30 people, probably more than that. But Yoast is supporting like probably 1 million sites. Like Yoast is big enough that you can trust it like that. And plugins that you use, I'm waxing eloquent on this. Totally answered your question. Any other questions?
How do you feel about Divi?
Divi, cool. Yes. Okay. So how do I feel about WordPress builders, where you can use WordPress, you get all the Yoast and you get all those other tools, and then you can use it without developing anything? I don't do that because I can't control it. There are ways to control it, but I find that it is a lot faster for me as a developer to develop something than it is to use one of those. Now with Gutenberg being very popular, come up over there. Oh, that's cool. My son just asked for more time with Minecraft. If you're trying to optimize a builder like that, if you're trying to optimize a builder like that, it's hard. But with Gutenberg, with the ability to change and add new blocks, you could get individual blocks. You could like download plugins for individual blocks, or you could do things like, from that perspective, you're going to get very close to the site that you want to see. WordPress is moving in leaps and bounds toward an integrated site builder interface with the full site editor that you could control so much. You may not need to jump for an additional plugin that does that. So maybe not necessary, but it depends.
We just felt like, because of our talent base, your weakest person can still fix that. Like a
Very much.
client manager can do textual update.
And you can get it 95% of the way to the design. And the next 5% is going to take 10 hours. Like,
I
it's
can
going to be
install fonts and just stuff,
Yeah.
weird stuff. I
every
can't
once in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, using tools. I've said this in general about software development, and it's very polarizing to say using tools can be a limitation. And so if you have build tooling, if you use Yarn and you build up this whole infrastructure with Webpack, and you're using specific scripts to minify your JavaScript and to pack it into different configurations, and you're using Babel to getting in the weeds, but the idea is there's a lot of stuff going on. You have to keep that up just as much as you have to keep your plugins up, just as much as you have to keep everything else up. And at a certain point, you get there, and then you're going back, and you're taking away all the abstractions and saying every one of my JavaScript files needs to be in a format that Google says, and deferred, and I'm doing all these things to them. On top of that, it's very hard because you added that tooling in. That's not to say that I don't use tooling, but I try to use it in a way that somebody else can access that later, and they don't need to use the tooling that I'm using. And that's really the benefit of using a plugin to minify, which is some developers out there, they're getting their pitchforks ready. But using a plugin to minify that stuff means that you can edit it at a certain level. However, using modern JavaScript or TypeScript would be really nice. There are certain applications where I would really, where I would jump for that, for sure. But that, yeah, sorry. Again, really long answer.
I didn't like Gutenberg when it came out.
It's getting
I
better.
was angry, and it kind of messed up things.
I mean, the #1 plugin for a really long time, they had to hide it from the list of the top plugins, was like Classic Editor.
Yeah.
Give the Classic Editor back. Let my ACFs just show as a form. We don't do that. Not anymore. Now we're showing people what it's going to look like in individual blocks. And we're starting to use modern CSS, like container queries and container sizing, so that those blocks can work better in the scope of how the page is going to work. And that's another thing that CSS has made leaps and bounds in. Probably the biggest shift after Internet Explorer got deprecated, when all of us were dancing on its grave. That was great. Now we're getting to the point where you don't have to worry about browser width, because your CSS does it. And so then if your component is only flexed with another component, or in the footer and it's super wide or something like that, it's all built in. You can have it like that, and that's what WordPress is leaning on, and that's Gutenberg's getting better. I'm highly optimistic. Other questions?
Do you contribute at all to WordPress in Gutenberg? Are
I've
you
been
in
trying.
Slack at all?
I've been trying. Yeah.
You're rejecting it.
It's the face. I'm trying. I'm trying to contribute to the local WordPress community first and foremost, because we in Pittsburgh, there is a thriving WordPress community in Pittsburgh, but COVID was really doing a number, and so I'd love to schedule some times for us to get together and just socialize, just get out there and do things like that. So look forward to that. It's coming. We found that co-working is really kind of fun. Like once every blue moon, co-work together. That helps a lot because I want to get out of the house. We're all on some distributed team that has a main office in Minneapolis, and never gonna go there. So like, you get that feedback. As designers, as brand builders, you need to make sure that you're not designing for yourself. So those kinds of things are making a comeback. It's great to see everybody come out for the talk. Yeah. Anything else? Maybe we could have some time where we just talk together. Cut off the live stream. We can just say hi and get to know each other. That would be really cool. And I'm sorry for everybody that's at home. I'm not going to get to do that, but that's fine. You're probably sick of this anyway. This face. Okay. Thanks, Colin.
You're very welcome.
Yeah. Do you have anything you want to say to the live stream?
No, they see my face far enough.
That's good enough. Cool.
That's it, folks.
That's it, folks.